what's up, friends? My name is Andre, and this is a Tennis and Bagels podcast. A podcast about essentially any tennis talk from recreational to professional tour. Just any topic that relates to tennis. I am thinking about it to try and talk to this podcast, so just because I just love tennis in general. And this week, today, as I'm recording it, is Thursday. There was supposed to be a podcast out today, but I wasn't really able to because of life got in the way, as I like to say sometimes. I don't feel like explaining much. But anyway, the thing is, this week and next week we were supposed to be having the Olympics right now, and I don't exactly remember when is tennis in the schedule of the Olympics, but I think it should be about in the first week, because the last week of the Olympics is dedicated to all of the athletics, to track and field and the marathon, obviously. So that's it for it. And but we're not having Olympics. That's really lame. It's one of my favorite events of every 4 years, like one of my favorite sporting events, actually. So I really enjoy watching essentially any sports that are in the Olympics. I think it's really interesting to get exposure to those different modalities of sports, different things that are happening, and even sports that I basically just don't understand at all and never really follow. In the Olympics is the time that I actually get really excited about seeing things. And one of the sports that I really love in the Olympics is actually the gymnastics, which has nothing to do with tennis really, but it's just that one thing that I really love. I love sports in general. Tennis just happens to be the one that I love the most, and I like to follow like at any occasion, except maybe for exhibitions. I'm not really a big exhibition guy. I like big tournaments and regular tournaments rather. But in the Olympics in tennis, there's a lot of story in that. There's a lot of history, let's say. And the Olympics is not held, and I don't think anybody holds the Olympics as a minor thing. Everybody loves the Olympics. Everybody wants to become a gold medalist. Everybody wants to win a medal in the Olympics. A gold medal is kind of like the dream, but receiving any medal in the Olympics must be a great thing, must be an amazing feeling. And in tennis, the Olympics actually add on to one of the biggest achievements in tennis, really, that you can actually get, the ones that few players have done, which is the career Golden Slam, that's what they call them, when you win all of the Grand Slams and then you win a gold medal. Currently, only Rafael Nadal has that achievement, and Andre Agassi has accomplished this. I don't remember exactly when, but he did it, probably in maybe 2000. And Steffi Graf was the one that managed to get it all in the same year, in 1988, if I'm not mistaken, which is just an immense feat. Like it's almost impossible, let's put it this way. Obviously, the Olympics happen every 4 years, so it's a really big deal to win all of those big tournaments in the same year. It's just a gigantic feat, and maybe at some point I will talk about that one achievement, especially speaking about Steffi Graf. But today I want to speak about a player, and as you know, for the title of this podcast, this player, Andy Murray, is a player that throughout the years, I've grown to really like him. I've grown to really enjoy his game and his, personality as well, and the things that he stands up for, and the fact that he's just not necessarily a person that tries to be anything that he is not, and he seems to be really accepting of his own personality. That he's more like a shy person, just kind of gives his interviews, just kind of like being really honest. And I was really, really happy for him when he won the Olympics in 2012. And that's the match that not the match, but really the event that I'll be talking today is the Olympics, and what it actually meant for Andy Murray. And I think that lots of people, if not all of the bigger tennis fans, the big tennis fans, really, the ones that actually follow and know about the accomplishments of the players, that winning the Olympics was probably like a pivotal point in his career, the moment where he stopped being just a threat to the big three, let's say, like, and that time, when he won the Olympics, Djokovic was in the beginning of his peak, let's say. So he had just had an amazing 2011, and 2012 he won one of the greatest matches of all time, one of the greatest finals, at least the longest final of all time, I think, in the Australian Open, against Nadal. And he was running high. I believe he was number one at the time, or maybe not. Maybe that was Federer at that time when he won the Olympics. But Djokovic started the year as number one, and Federer is coming back from a year of not winning a Slam, and he won at Wimbledon over Andy Murray. And so Andy Murray was kind of like the only one of the big four that hadn't really had the moment, the breakthrough part of his career. And 2012 was arguably the moment, the year in his career that allowed Andy Murray to achieve all that he has achieved so far. And the Olympics is regarded as most likely the pivotal moment in his career, the moment in which he was able to finish 2012 with a Grand Slam, his first Grand Slam, and to lead the way towards his first Wimbledon victory in the next year, essentially in 2013, when he beat Novak Djokovic as well in the final in straight sets. And the Olympics were a very interesting match, really, because the score was lame. If you watch the match, it wasn't necessarily like a lot going on. It's probably very emotional for lots of people, for British people, to watch it, British fans. And Andy Murray is probably never going to forget the match. And at the time, he was even saying how that was obviously the biggest title of his career, the biggest win of his career. It was the first time he's beaten Roger Federer in a best-of-5 match. Hadn't yet beaten Federer in a Grand Slam. That would happen in the next year, in 2013. But it was his first victory over Federer in a best-of-5, and the first victory over Federer in the big final. So, regardless of how Federer was playing, regardless of how Murray was playing, it was a big win, and it was very meaningful for him. Murray had beaten Djokovic in the semifinal just before, that match, I think the day before, or 2 days before, and Federer had defeated Juan Martín del Potro with a score of 19-17 in the third set, which, by the way, kind of can be used as some sort of a example to defend the argument that Grand Slams don't actually need to have a best of 5. You can just kind of like not have the tiebreaker in the last set, or maybe you can do it like Wimbledon and you just have a tiebreaker like 12-all, and you can still get a very, very long match, and kind of reserve the best of 5 to the final. But that's not the topic of today. The topic is Andy Murray in the Olympics and how he beat Federer, and he beat it. Oh my gosh. But starting before that, I think it's important to mention a little bit Wimbledon 2012. That final, Andy Murray was up a set, and then he lost the final 3 sets, the next 3 sets to Federer, and he didn't take the trophy home. He was the first British male player to reach the final in Wimbledon at that point was 76 years. Or 75, 76 or 75, either or. And it was a lot of pressure for him. It was the first, it wasn't already a big thing that he was the only there wasn't a British champion in Wimbledon since 1938. It was an incredibly long time as well that there wasn't even a finalist at Wimbledon. Tim Hammond got really close in his career. He got to the semifinals, but he hadn't reached the final in the Grand Slam. There wasn't even a finalist in a Grand Slam at all. So there wasn't. Fred Perry was the last British champion in the male tour. Years before the Open era even started, and Britain was just really looking to see a champion at home, and that was a lot of pressure for him. Not only had Andy Murray not been a Grand Slam champion yet, for him to reach the Wimbledon final, he wasn't a Grand Slam champion, and if he were to win that first title, like at Wimbledon, that was as his first Grand Slam and the first one, the first British champion in Wimbledon since 1938, that was probably way too much for him to take in. And playing against Federer was definitely the worst person that he could ever possibly play. Federer at that moment was a 6-time champion at Wimbledon. He's now an 8-time champion. He won. Wait, what? Hold on a second. He won 2009. Yeah, that was his 7th title. Yeah. I was watching the highlights earlier, and they say that he was a 6-time champion, but that was as the match went on, they kind of made that comment, but that got me confused for a bit. But anyway, that he became the 7-time. He tied Sampras's record in the men's tour of 7 Wimbledon titles. He hasn't yet tied Martina Navratilova record of 9 titles at Wimbledon. But now he's at 8 titles, and Federer is just regarded as probably the greatest male player on grass ever, and he just loves playing on grass, and he just plays well there. Like if there is a Grand Slam that people think that Federer still has a chance of winning, is Wimbledon. People don't even consider the hard courts either anymore. A little bit partially because of how Djokovic has become so good on them. He just dominates the Australian Open. Surprisingly enough, doesn't dominate at all the US Open, but still. But Andy Murray wasn't playing badly in the first set. He actually won the first set, and he had a clear strategy. His strategy was essentially try to play to Federer's backhand and open up the forehand side and attack it. And he would, not likely, but he would he was looking to get either Federer on a running forehand to either just be completely out of position so that side was completely open and Federer wouldn't be able to get there, so he went for a winner, or on the running forehand, Federer would make an enforced error. That was essentially what he was doing. And if Federer was getting the forehand to work, he would reset the point by playing back on the backhand. And on break points, Andy Murray was serving to the backhand as well. And probably for most of the match, he was serving to the backhand, which is basically a regular strategy against Federer, no matter who you are. And he did it pretty well in the first set, but after that, like, Federer was playing well. He wasn't playing badly either. He was serving lots of aces and serving well, and his forehand was clicking. He was moving fantastically. If you watch the highlights, some of the movements that Federer makes off of his forehand, just like running around it and going to the net, everything was working fine, and even his backhand was doing the job really well. So Federer was just inspired that day, and Andy Murray was doing well, but just couldn't handle it. And you can kind of see, especially after he lost the second set, they kind of got a little bit lost in his ways. He just kind of like reverted back to his basic Andy Murray ways of defending and just kind of like going cross court no matter what. And he just didn't seem to follow the strategy very well. And that ended up being one of the biggest losses in his career. It was a very sad moment for him. And then after that, he went to the Olympics. And the Olympics, I don't think he could have been in a better spot in Andy Murray's career. If he had reached the final of Wimbledon a year before, maybe he wouldn't have been able to accomplish what he did. Maybe he wouldn't have been able to either win Wimbledon or a Grand Slam, or the Olympic gold medal. and he did it twice. So in 2012, it wasn't in Great Britain. It was just the stage was there. It was set up. It was a rematch against Federer, and the pressure was there. But he was he was explaining a little bit as well, like in his interviews, how it made things easier that he already reached the Wimbledon final because he knew a little bit of how the crowd was in that position. He knew to be in that position already. And on the courts of Wimbledon, even though he wasn't in Wimbledon, and with a home crowd. So that helped him like keep his head straight, to keep his strategy working and flowing, and to not really get lost in trying to do different things, or just kind of go back to some sort of plan B, like a comfort zone where nothing really happens. He just kept attacking. He just kept doing it really well. He kept not necessarily going for too much, but attacking with intent and keeping his margins high enough, that large enough that he wouldn't make too many errors. And that was very good for him. That fact that it was a bit of a windy day, and Federer was just not finding himself in the match. He just couldn't land serves. His backhand was just all right, and his volley approaches were just weird at times. Like you would see him coming to the net on nothing shots and just made terrible decisions throughout the match. And but all credit to Murray, because and that's kind of like when you see clutchness, when you see Murray really growing and rising to the occasion, is that he faced a lot of breakpoints. He faced 9 breakpoints throughout that match, and he was able to save all of them, and he was able to follow the strategy and keep his head straight and keep his mind on the strategy and what he should do. And when he did a lot on the break points, you can see if you watch the match that he served a lot to obviously Federer's backhand, but he served a lot into Federer's body. And Federer is always just not moving incredibly well during that match, so the body serve was destroying him. Like he was getting to just block the ball back on court. It's kind of like an awkward balloon ball, just like landing right in the middle of the court, and no pace, and just high enough for Murray to just finish it off. And he couldn't manage it. So all credit goes to Murray in that sense, that he was able to not allow Federer into that match, because he did that a little bit. Of course, it was a little bit harder in the final of Wimbledon that he just played, but allowing Federer back into the match and dictating momentum and just stealing that momentum, maybe it would have cost Murray's title in the Olympics. And even though it doesn't look like it looks like Murray just completely destroyed Federer. Federer had his chances in the match, and if he had taken a few of them, maybe the score would have been different. Maybe the entire match, the story of the match, would have been totally different. So that's the story of how essentially Murray won the Olympics. And for him, it probably meant, I just think because you cannot actually figure out like how does that feel for him. For me, I'm not British, I'm not a tennis player, I haven't won the gold medal or something, so I can't really relate to that. But I can only imagine essentially how much did that mean to him, that he was able to win a best of 5 set matches against Roger Federer on the courts of Wimbledon on his home crowd after a very, very tough loss. He got a rematch. He got essentially all of the belief that he needed, all of the self-confidence that he needed, that he can do this, that he can win. And he was doing a few interviews afterwards, and he was mentioning how the US Open was coming up, and I would really like, and he was saying something along the lines of, I would really like to win it, so I would try to do my best there. And little did he know that he would actually go on to win that match, the final match against Djokovic in 5 sets. And he took his first Grand Slam title, his first Grand Slam champion from Britain, in Mayo champion, in 77 years, I think. And that's just incredible for him. And the Wimbledon title, I think, not the Wimbledon title, but the Olympics title, I think completely changed the look that he had on his career, changed the way that he felt as just an underdog, as just the guy that's trailing behind Djokovic, Nadal, and Federer, to being a person that thinks, no, I am able to do this. I am able to win those titles. And he did it. He won the US Open. And without the Olympics, I don't think he would have been able to win the US Open. Without the Olympics, I don't think he would have been able to, even if he had won those first two sets against Djokovic, I don't think he would have been able to win that final set once Djokovic came back from 2-0 down. And he was able to bring it home. He was able to keep his head straight, keep his mind in the strategy in the game, and keep his focus, and managed to like cross the line at the end. And even if winning Grand Slam was still a novel experience for him, was something that he hadn't done yet, having beaten Federer in the Olympics in a best of 5 sets and his home crowd. And I think it's incredibly important that he played in the grounds of Wimbledon, because it felt real. It's like you feel like it's not really the tournament, or the court is not necessarily what makes the match difficult in a sense. He could actually feel like, I am on this court, I can win it. And he had been in the final of the US Open before in 2008, and he's managed to make it back in the final in 2012 and win that match. And I can only imagine like the preparations that he was going through in his mind, and remembering that gold medal that he had. There's a possibility even that he had his gold medal on him during the US Open. I don't think he would have, but if I were him, maybe I would, because I would remember it. Or maybe he just kind of like reverse psychology in a sense, like I can leave my gold medal in my house because I don't need it. I know I am enough. You know, he doesn't need a token to win his match. He doesn't need a lucky charm to win big titles. He's enough on his own. His game is enough. And there was a discussion on Twitter. There was a poll of what was more important for Murray to have won Wimbledon 2013, his first one. And I voted for the US Open because in my mind, when I was voting and I was thinking about this, I could only think of Murray's win in the US Open as his maiden Grand Slam. So he has kind of like half the weight of Britain on his shoulders at this point, because it's not a Grand Slam winner that they won anymore. It's a Wimbledon champion. And as a Wimbledon champion, it was probably made easier for him to have won the US Open. But on a second look, after thinking a little bit about it, and after reading some of the comments in the thread, like for me, when I vote in the poll on Twitter, on Twitter really, I try not to read the thread before, because I just want to like have my own opinion and my own mind on what it is, and then as I look into the other comments, I see the people's opinions and arguments about the other. So thinking back, I probably would have voted the Olympics as well. But thinking even a little further than that, winning Wimbledon for Murray, it was the third step for him. It was the final hurdle, and that he had to cross. And I don't think he would have been able to win the US Open without the Olympics. And I don't think he would have been able to win Wimbledon without the US Open. Even if he had won the Olympics, maybe he would have had a chance, but I don't think he would have, because suppose that he goes to the US Open final and he plays against Djokovic and he loses that final. He faced Djokovic again in the Wimbledon final. How much more confidence would Murray had by winning that final? Whereas if he hadn't won it, maybe he would not really believe in himself, even though he had won the Olympics, because the Olympics were already a year later. And he would probably have thought to himself, if he had lost the US Open final, something along those lines of, I won the Olympics, but the Olympics are not they're not a Grand Slam. It's just the Olympics. It's not the biggest tournaments of our sport. It's not really what represents our sport, really. What really stays in history, although the Olympics does stay in history, is really the Grand Slams. The Grand Slams are the prestige of a tennis player. The Olympics are the prestige of an athlete. But as a tennis player, it probably feels better to win a Grand Slam. But that's kind of like along those lines of just kind of like if you just sit down on your couch and you think about it. But to win the Olympics is probably still an incredible thrill. And I don't know, I feel like Federer probably thinks for himself, man, I really wish I had won at least one gold medal. And maybe he will have probably a chance next year if he stays healthy. But that will be definitely his last chance. I don't think there's any way that he can come back at age 44 and win a gold medal. If he does that, honestly, it will be probably the feat of his career, and one of the biggest feats in tennis, I would say. But yeah, Murray won the Olympics, and he followed that up nicely, very nicely, with the US Open. And those two steps, I think, were the major reason why he won Wimbledon, because with the US Open, with the Olympics win, he thought to himself, I can win the big titles. And he was able to keep his focus in the US Open final. And then he won that final. And then when he won that final, he probably realized, I crossed a major hurdle in my life right now. And he went with that baggage to Wimbledon 2013. And as a Grand Slam champion, as a reigning Grand Slam champion, he just made sure that he channeled all of his energy from the Olympics, all of the energy from the crowd that he was hearing cheering for him, and then remembering how he became a hero at the US Open. He was both of those very tied together, the Olympics and the US Open, to win at Wimbledon once he got there in 2013 against Novak Djokovic. But yeah, the Olympics are definitely probably the biggest turning point in Murray's career. You can likely trace a timeline and say this is Murray pre-Olympic Games and this is Murray post-Olympic Games. And Murray starts being a really, really good player, if I'm not mistaken, in either 2006 or 7 when he beat Gasquet, or is it 2005? Around those years, like maybe in 2005 to 2007 when he beat Gasquet in I want to say the quarterfinals or fourth round in Wimbledon. And that's one of the moments in which Murray becomes a player who's confident in himself, that he can get deep into tournaments. But from that, getting deep in tournaments to actually winning them, that's when Murray had to cross this hurdle in the Olympics. And when he won it in 2012, that's when things changed. That's when number one Murray was born, even though he only went on to become number one in 2016. He probably was thinking back a lot into this Olympics match and how much focus and strategy actually were so important for him to take that win. And yeah, I don't think I think this is probably one of the biggest Olympic story that I know of. And not to take anything away from, for example, from Nadal when he won in 2008, or when Murray won again in 2016. But if an Olympic title, an Olympic medal meant so much for someone, I don't think anything really compares to Andy Murray winning the Olympics. I think it's probably the Olympic tennis story that will stand for the ages and will be probably the most pivotal win in the Olympics that ever was, at least in tennis history. Maybe I'm wrong. If you think I'm wrong, you feel free to reach out to me on Twitter and just say that I am totally wrong, that there was this and that match. But honestly, for Andy Murray to finish a 77-year drought of a British male player champion and the grounds of Wimbledon, the Olympics were definitely a huge relief for him and a huge help in him carrying the burden and finally lifting that burden when he won in 2013. And yeah, that's Andy Murray's story in the Olympics. And please let me know if I missed something. Let me know if something there was something that I missed that I should have discussed in this episode. And yeah, feel free to reach out to me again, as I said, on Twitter. My handle is @androlenberg, like and as in tennis and bagels, right? And Rolenberg, ROLEMBERG. Hope I spelled that correctly. I'm tired right now. So yeah, and follow me on Instagram @tennisandbagels, and on Facebook as well, Facebook.com/tennisandbagels. Make sure you, I don't know, give me a review if you're on Apple Podcast. That would actually mean a lot to me, because reviews really, really, really help a podcast to grow and to get to more people and more listeners. So if you do enjoy my episodes, the work that I do here, and if you enjoy, I don't know, talking to me on Twitter, give me that little boost. It would be really, really appreciated. So thanks for listening up until now, and I'll see you guys next week, hopefully on Thursday at 9 a.m. And maybe there'll be some really great things happening for this podcast in the near future. So stay tuned, and thanks so much for listening. This is Andre and the Tennis and Bagels podcast. Bye-bye.